is to declare a recess at any time. Good afternoon. I want to welcome all of our witnesses and express my appreciation for your attendance and certainly for your testimony today. Today's hearing will explore concerns and complaints about transparency and accountability at the Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs. Just about a year ago, we had a similar hearing where the administrator obviously testified, and in reviewing some of the transcripts, I was reminded of some of the moments in that where the communication between you and members of this committee was, I guess, less than clear. And so we posed some questions that seem very forthright to us, but seem maybe to be confused. And so obviously this follow-up hearing hopefully will provide some clarity as we look at that. For example, can you send a list of either proposed rules or other rules that are undergoing the informal review process? And the administrator said, well, I don't know, what are you referring to? So of course I was referring to the same process that the GAO has referred to as an informal review, at least as early as 2003, which is the time prior to the agency's formal submission of a rule to OIRA, during which OIRA frequently has had a significant influence over the development of the rule. So this year we wanted to bring back in some of the experts, including a regulatory expert from GAO, to help us maybe wade through some of this messy process and possibly help us bridge the communication gap that may have resulted from my inability to articulate exactly what we were looking for. GAO and regulatory experts have been calling for greater transparency and accountability from OIRA for more than a decade. In fact, in 2003, GAO issued a report that provided significant details on how OIRA's review process could be addressed, but also raised several concerns about transparency and accountability. And since then, GAO has issued reports and recommendations on how agencies and OIRA identify significant regulations and how they explain the cost-benefit analysis and improve retrospective regulatory reviews. By my count, there are about 17 open recommendations that OIRA has not yet addressed and that would improve the federal regulatory process. Instead, OIRA is marred by consistently late reporting, incomplete analysis, poor data quality, and insufficient oversight of the federal regulatory process. OIRA is quite possibly an agency overwhelmed by this responsibility and insufficient resources, but the public doesn't know because of OIRA has failed to provide any insight into that process. So hopefully we'll be able to hear some on that today. In the past year, the committee has experienced a frustration of the secretive regulatory process at OIRA firsthand. I want to emphasize that I use the word frustration, and I could use something much more definitive in terms of making that analysis. During last year's hearing, several subcommittee members, myself included, requested that the administrator provide documentation on how OIRA conducted its reviews as it relates to the waters of the USA rulemaking. This type of request is something that we would ask of any agency so that the committee can conduct its oversight responsibilities effectively. In general, agencies provide the committee with the information it needs to understand what happened and why. Some agencies take longer than others, but generally we receive the information in a relatively reasonable period of time. Our experience with OIRA, however, has been different. And in the past year, we've experienced an unprecedented effort, in our opinion, to obstruct the committee's oversight abilities and restrict access to information about the federal regulatory process. OIRA's resistance to complying with the committee's simple request raises more concerns than we had last year. Persistent requests for transparencies and assistance with oversight from the public and now from Congress are apparently met with disregard from OIRA. This committee may need to look into other means to ensure that the agency is an effective regulatory gatekeeper and accountable to the taxpayers. And while the committee's investigation into OIRA's review of the WOTUS rulemaking is ongoing, it is really not the focus of this hearing. The committee wanted to hold this hearing to explore policy concerns and maybe options, Administrator, to address those concerns. And so today we ask our witnesses both where additional transparency and accountability at OIRA are needed, as well as what legislative efforts that the committee should consider to spread a little sunshine into the secretive, deliberative process of the agency. And do you think that putting OIRA's regulatory review function into a statute would help OIRA better understand its obligations to Congress and the American people? Or is OIRA's overburdened with the numerous obligations that you have? Does OIRA need more staff to conduct a more thorough review of the regulatory actions and meet its current obligations for transparency? We just want to know how this committee can help crack OIRA open for public review and purview, and Congress to better understand the important work that this agency does. So any thoughts or suggestions that the witnesses can offer us would be very helpful. And with that, I would now like to recognize my good friend, Mr. Conley, the ranking member of the Subcommittee on Government Operations, for his opening statement.